Hello there. Thanks for spending some time with me on my website. As I make this broadcast, we are worried about hurricane coming over our way. So much of Hurricane Harvey. What a name. My middle name is Harvey. And we just got a tiger here at LSU named Harvey as a mascot. Now Hurricane Harvey is bringing destruction over to my home state of Louisiana after doing so much devastation over in the Houston area. And we're praying for those folks over there and keeping our guard up here. We've had a lot of rain over the last few days. We'll get a lot more. I heard on several of the national news programs the second guessing already beginning. What they're saying is, are we ever going to learn the lessons of building in zones where you should never build in the first place? They're talking about Houston growing so rapidly with over 6 million people, and the fact that there is so many areas that can't drain very well. And should this growth have taken place in the first place? A legitimate question to ask. But in that discussion, there's always comparisons to New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina, what happened after Katrina. And I thought for listeners who are not down in this area, I'd clarify that event because I was so intimately involved dealing with families and friends and relatives in the New Orleans area, going down every day to help with evacuation. It really hit close to home. The knock is that New Orleans is in such a low area, it never should have been rebuilt in the first place, or many areas should not have been developed. Is that true? Well, here's where it comes. You got to go back in history. The country needed a port facility at the mouth of the Mississippi River to take incoming and outgoing traffic. The Port of New Orleans is the largest port in America. It's also surrounding an area that produces more oil and gas than any place in America, has the second largest grouping of refineries for energy in America, the largest chemical industry up and down that river in America, largest seafood production in America, largest sulfur production in America, all synergized around New Orleans. And so if you didn't have a city there, you would not have all of these natural resources that flow throughout the rest of America and throughout the world. Of course, the port traffic is enormous. The first, third, and fifth largest ports in America are all located in Louisiana, and most of them go right down the Mississippi River. So you've got to have a location for the huge boats to come in and unload. They can't come up the Mississippi River to go to St. Louis. That all has to be unloaded. So if you're going to have commerce in America, you need a port city like New Orleans. And that was known from word go. New Orleans was always below sea level. There's no surprise about that. Those of you who've been in the French Quarter can look up as you're walking down Bourbon or Royal Street, one of the main streets in the French Quarter, look up towards the river, and you can see the ships 20 feet above you going by, because the river is higher than the French Quarter and higher than many places in New Orleans. So to deal with that problem, a decision was made by the U.S. government. We would build levees. That New Orleans is so critical to the commerce of America. We'll build levees to protect the city, and therefore that should take care of the problem. And quite frankly, they were right. That should have taken care of the problem. When Hurricane Katrina hit 12 years ago this week, I remember it so vividly. At the time, I was listening to a local radio station a day before Katrina, and that storm came into the Gulf, went across Florida, went out into the Atlantic Ocean, came back into the Gulf, and made a beeline right towards New Orleans. There was very little time for preparation. And I remember it well, the panic of people were trying to evacuate. And one of the problems in New Orleans is because it's completely surrounded by water, there's no way, there's hardly any area at all that does not have land accessibility. If you go to New Orleans on the south, you've got the Gulf of Mexico. On the north, you've got Lake Pontchartrain, that's one of the largest lakes in America. Then you've got Gulf outlets to the east, and just one or two outlets to the west to get you out over land. So there's only about 2 or 3 evacuation routes out of the city, which causes massive problems. In any event, the levees surrounded the city, and the word went out, we've got a massive hurricane, we've got to get ready for it. Well, the hurricane came through initially offshore as Hurricane 5. It was going to be a torrential storm. By the time it hit the city, it was a Hurricane 1. It didn't do a lot of damage initially. I had a number of folks from New Orleans, my brother-in-law and other family members, that came up and spent the night with us the night before Katrina hit. The next morning after Katrina, one of my relatives called a fellow who'd been there to protect their house, and said, what damage did it do? He said, not a lot. We got a few shingles off the roof, some branches that are down. Come on back home. Everything's okay. And so my relatives packed up their cars and were heading back to New Orleans. And then another call came in and said, uh-oh, be careful. We don't know what's going on, but there's 3 feet of water in the streets. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't the fact that there was too much development. It was the fact that a decision had been made to put up levees, and the levees didn't hold. The levees collapsed. First, the 17th Street Canal is what it's called, and then areas out by Lake Pontchartrain. And one after the other, the Corps of Engineers designed levees. The federal money spent by the Corps of Engineers to build these levees just were not designed properly. It was a flaw. It was not negligence, but it was a lack of proper planning that caused these levees to collapse. So it's a misnomer to say, guys, you shouldn't be developing an area like New Orleans. Why put money down there? Because it's flooding. Well, of course, we know that. We knew that back in this 18th century that it was going to flood. That's no surprise. But there was so much valuable assets coming out of the city, it was necessary to take some action. Levees were built, and if the levees had been designed and built properly, you would not have had the billions and billions of dollars of damage that was caused and over 1,000 people killed. So I want to make that distinction because as the second guessing goes on, we look at Houston, we compared the two cities. It's comparing apples and oranges. Houston made a concerted effort to develop in outlying areas where there were many streams and bayous that probably in retrospect but it developed. New Orleans never was protected, never was open. It was from word go an unprotected area that needed help. The help of the levees were built by the federal government. They didn't act properly. So we don't want to second guess. We're moving on, but I want to make that clear to our viewers all over the country. Hey, glad you spent some time on my website this week. We'll talk about a lot of this in my weekend radio show. The schedule's on this website. We'll talk again soon. Take care.